Coming up on Network Africa, Libya's government strikes a deal with militias to leave the country, regular forces to police Tripoli again. France calls on Rwanda to end support for M23 rebels and pull troops out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Plus, South Africa budget boosts welfare grants ahead of May's general election. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in Libya, where the government says it has come to an agreement with militias in the state to leave the country. After more than a decade of controlling Tripoli, the armed groups have now agreed to leave Libya's capital. The Interior Ministry, that's part of the internationally recognized government, announced the deal, saying that this came after lengthy negotiations for regular forces to police Tripoli. There would now only be emergency police, city officers and criminal investigators in their place. Now, this deal is coming after a series of deadly clashes in the city in recent months. Libya has been battered by many armed groups who emerged after the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi back in 2011. A series of armed uprisings that led to the longtime dictator's killing created a security vacuum, with much of the country left lawless and chaotic. Well, let's explore this story further. Joining us now is Defense and Security Analyst David Otto for more on this. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Could you perhaps help us understand what this deal between the government and the militia in Libya, what it entails?
Well, Layo, you're right. I mean, the government in Tripoli has struck a deal, requiring 5 of the armed groups within Tripoli to leave their locations, and go back to what they term their barracks. The details of these deals are shrouded in some high-level secrecy in terms of what then happens to these militias. You've got to remember that between 2011 and 2014, when Muammar Gaddafi, his government lost the monopoly to the use of force, many of these militias, became very prominent, within the Libyan, architecture, especially in Tripoli and Benghazi, where you have rival governments of the GNU, government of the National Union, supported by the UN and, of course, Turkey, but also the government of the National Accord, the government of, Khalifa Haftar in Benghazi, that they call the Libyan National Army. This was the first, militias that developed from the LNA under, Khalifa Haftar. And since then, Layo, you've had several militias either supporting one government faction either in the east or one government faction in the west. So there are so many militia groups operating in Libya in such a way that one would be right to say that, the militias are the state. On the other hand, the state is the militias, because they are so intertwined into politics, into finance, into banking, into administration, in such a way that it will be very difficult for a deal just to allow 5 of these groups to leave Tripoli to make any difference in terms of the way of how powerful these militias have been within Libya.
Well, like you've earlier pointed out, Libya is currently divided. It's divided between the internationally recognized government, and that's in the west, and an administration by strongman Khalifa Haftar in the east. But will this agreement now help bring about a much-needed stability to Libya?
I think it's a great step, forward, but I doubt, hugely that it will create a dent in terms of, bringing back some level of stability. Libya is a very good case of, how not to remove a dictator. The government has lost its monopoly of power. It's just a reflection of the kind of scenario that is ongoing between Russia and Ukraine, whereby in the case of Libya, they were removed by a NATO-backed government. And now, putting back the the entire country together has become very chaotic. So, I mean, in my experience and talking to the people in Libya, I think, these militias have more or less, embedded themselves, within the security architecture. They are very professional. They even named themselves, after, government, security architecture. They call themselves the 444 Brigade, the 111 Brigade, the General Security Force, the Special Defense Forces. So they are very much embedded within the state. They are very professional as well. They have some high level of discipline. They are very reliable within the areas where they operate. They are very uncompromising, but above all, they are skilled and they have a centralized command and control. So I doubt that any negotiations, to remove a couple of them away from Tripoli will make any difference in terms of bringing stability into Libya. I mean, you require more than that. I understand that, most of these groups were responsible for defeating the so-called ISIS, in Libya. So they are very much embedded within the Libyan architecture. And I don't think, we would see any form of stability very soon.
All right, then, if you say so, David, aside this deal, what more then can be done to help Libya back on its feet? And, it's not only the security challenges the country is facing, it also has, Libya is a point of illegal migration for many that are seeking to leave Africa into Europe.
You're right. I mean, Libya has brought a lot of chaos. I mean, not just to itself, to neighboring states, but for example, the influx of weapons, light and small weapons, within Africa, within countries like Nigeria itself, has been as a result of the chaos, that, has happened in Libya. Of course, you talk about the migration issue that Europe has experienced. So I think what needs to be done, first of all, is to have a recognized government, one government. But the trouble, Layo, is that the West, has been very cozy with people like Khalifa Haftar. The French invited him to France, gave him legitimacy. On the other hand, the West has also cozied itself with some of these militia groups, thinking that, by bringing them close, there will be some kind of an understanding for an election that, has failed to take place in Libya for ages. So Libya needs to be stabilized. We need one government, not two, as we have it in Tripoli and Benghazi. And within that, you have rival governments as well. So I tell you, Libya is a very chaotic state. I think, only Libyans, can actually come up with a solution to this. But the problem is they've now, attached themselves, to very powerful militias. And it's almost like it's a state, run by private armies. And this is the challenge that Libya faces. But there is hope. If we have, the likes of the AU, coming up with an African strategy to deal with the situation in Libya. Without that, I don't see any hope as we speak.
All right, David, finally and very quickly, could the DRC learn from this? The country is currently battling with numerous rebel groups that are fighting, especially in the eastern part of the country. Or perhaps you think it's not the same thing?
Well, I think there are similar, I think you can talk about this as you can have some similarities between what is happening in Libya and DRC. The only difference is that in DRC, there is a centralized government. In the case of Libya, we don't have that, advantage. But I think what lessons can be learned is the fact that, external parties or countries should not be supporting one rebel group against the other. In the case of Libya, for example, you've got Turkey backing the government of national unity in Tripoli. You've got, countries, like Lebanon, the UAE, the likes of Russia and the Wagner forces backing the government of in Benghazi under Khalifa Haftar. And this is one of the reasons why in the case of Congo, DRC, the likes of the US, the UN, the European Union, have kicked very much against the accusations that have been made against Rwanda for supporting groups like the M23. Of course, Rwanda has denied these allegations. But it tells you that, within countries like Congo, I think what the Congolese government has to learn is the fact that, the more embedded these militia groups or rebel groups are within within the communities that they operate. The more they become so attached to politics, making decisions as to who becomes a politician, funding is being provided to them, soft landing is given to them. I think the more they dig deep, the more difficult it will become for the Rwandan state, for the DRC government to deal with these issues. Despite, I have to mention this, despite having regional bodies like SADC, Kenyans, sending their forces there, the UN, you need a comprehensive strategy. And I think one thing that the Congolese government has to learn about this is that, just giving concessions to militia group is never a sustainable answer.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Defense and Security Analyst David Otto. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, moving on, France is calling on Rwanda to end all support for M23 rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo and for troops to withdraw from Congolese territory. Paris made the call in a communique released, saying it is very concerned by the situation in the eastern part of DRC, particularly around Goma and Sake. The communique adds that attacks on the territorial integrity of DRC are inadmissible and that the M23 must cease fighting immediately and withdraw from all areas it occupies. Well, this statement follows a similar warning from the United States about the situation, with the State Department also calling for the withdrawal of the Rwandan army and asking Kigali to withdraw its surface-to-air missile systems. However, Rwanda has consistently rejected the call and accusations, with the Foreign Ministry saying its troops are defending Rwandan territory as Congo carries out what it calls a dramatic military build-up near the border. The head of the UN mission in the Central African Republic, MINUSCA, is requesting the Security Council's support for an urgent response to the threat by explosive ordnance devices, EODs, both for the protection of civilians and also the safety and security of peacekeepers. Ms. Valentine Rogwabiza presented the most recent report of the Secretary General on the Central African Republic and updated council members on the recent developments in the country, as well as the implementation of MINUSCA's mandate.
I therefore wish to request this council support for an urgent, dedicated, and truly multidimensional response to this threat, both for the protection of civilians and safety and security of our peacekeepers. We need to do the utmost to prevent the spread of these lethal weapons to other regions of the Central African Republic. This approach should include investing in situational awareness, as well as focus cross-border cooperation on the origins and sources of supply of these weapons. As we prepare soon to initiate MINUSCA's budget deliberations, we sincerely count on the Council members and all member states to avail MINUSCA with the requisite transport and logistic means to consolidate and expand logistical support to the government of the Central African Republic, to the national defense and internal security forces to fulfill their primary responsibility of protection of civilians and exercise sovereignty over their territory.
Well, in a historic move, South Africa's parliament has impeached one of the country's top judges for misconduct. John Shope is the leading judge in Western Cape Province, and he has been removed after an investigation found that he tried to influence justices at the country's top court in a case relating to former President Jacob Zuma. He's said to have approached two judges in 2008 to see if they would support Mr. Zuma in a decision relating to a corruption case. However, Mr. Shope denies the accusation. A second judge, Nkola Motata, was also impeached for disorderly conduct and racial outbursts relating to a 2007 drunk driving accident. Mr. Motata, who has since retired, was a High Court judge in Gauteng Province at the time of the incident. He also denies the accusation. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa will now have to sign off the decision and set a date for their formal removal. The judges will then lose all benefits, including a lifetime monthly salary worth over 1 million rand, a car allowance, and comprehensive medical care. We'll take a break now on Network Africa. Still ahead. For Somalia announces a major defense deal with Turkey to deter Ethiopia's access to sea through the breakaway region Somaliland. Please stay with us for more details. Welcome back to the program. The South African National Treasury is pumping 61.4 billion rand over the medium term to help alleviate the country's growing unemployment crisis. Finance Minister Enoch Gondongwana says the ministry has also allocated 7.4 billion rand for the Presidential Employment Initiative to help get South Africans back to work and grow the economy. Our South African correspondent, Innocent Samosa, reports.
South African government will raise an estimated 5 billion rand in taxes from members who are accessing the once-off withdrawals in line with the two-pot retirement forms.
Progress has been made on the two-pot retirement system since I last addressed you during the medium-term budget policy system. Contribution to retirement funds will be split with 1/3 going into a savings component, 2/3 going into a retirement component. We must commend on Honorable Maswanga. He has been vociferous in making sure that this bill passes. And we even fought on the timelines. It was difficult to persuade him because the industry was not ready.
Economists indicate that the budget speech surpassed expectations to some extent. Nevertheless, numerous risks persist.
We were on the optimistic end of the spectrum of forecasts for this budget, and the key fiscal metrics were even a little bit better than we expected. There are still many risks to both the revenue and the expenditure trajectories, but we think the most important is the overarching message of this budget, namely that government is still committed to fiscal consolidation. It's still pursuing a primary budget surplus so that we can ultimately stabilize our debt-GDP ratio. This budget very clearly signals that commitment to fiscal consolidation and very clearly signals fiscal discipline in pursuit of this debt stabilization.
The General Industry Workers Union of South Africa says the minister missed the opportunity to address important issues.
One of the projects that is being compromised is, of course, informal settlement upgrading system, which is upgrading project that is meant to basically ensure that informal settlements are upgraded to provide a decent housing and accommodation for all. We believe that once again, the ANC has chosen the rich over the poor. We believe that this budget is an admission by the ANC that it has no answer to the crisis facing the working class in the form of unemployment, rising levels of poverty, but also collapsing public services everywhere.
The National Treasury says it's still discussing options to replace the 350 grand and the balance between policy options to support higher employment. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Malawi has suspended the issuing of passports following a cyber attack on the computer system at the country's immigration service. Now, for the past 2 weeks, the country has not been issuing the travel documents for what officials say was a technical glitch. But that is not so, as the president, Lazarus Chakwera, just revealed for the first time that the immigration system had been hacked and that the hackers are asking for a ransom. He says the government would not give in to their demands and is working to resolve the problem. Demand for passports is high in Malawi, with many young people looking to migrate in search of job opportunities. Mr. Chakwera also said he has given the Immigration Department 3 weeks within which it should provide a temporary solution and resume the issuing of passports while waiting to regain control of the system, adding that a long-term solution with additional security safeguards would also be developed. Somalia's parliament has approved a major defense agreement with Turkey. Under the 10-year deal, Turkey will arm and train Somali Navy forces and deploy its own ships in Somali waters. Well, analysts say it's a major step in enhancing Somalia's maritime security and appears aimed at deterring Ethiopia's efforts to secure access to the sea by way of the breakaway region of Somaliland. Prime Minister Hamza Abdi says the deal also eliminates fears of terrorism, piracy, illegal fishing, and the dumping of toxic waste. Well, this comes as Ethiopia earlier on in the year signed a controversial agreement with the self-declared Republic of Somaliland, which has now increased tensions between Mogadishu and Addis Ababa. Somalia, which considers Somaliland part of its territory, has accused Ethiopia of violating its sovereignty. Here in Nigeria, the Lagos state government is seeking partnership with other countries to achieve the SDG goals. The state deputy governor, Kadri Hamzat, says collective effort must be put in place to ensure that no one is left behind under the Sustainable Goals Initiative. Mr. Hamzat, who was speaking during a meeting with members of high commissions and development partners in Ikoyi, says the state government welcomes collaborative ventures that will leave a lasting legacy for generations to come.
Based on the initiatives,
how to foster partnership for the attainment of sustainable development goals in Lagos State is the reason for this gathering on the island. The State Deputy Governor Kadri Hamzat, some members of the State Executive Council, as well as the Consul General of the Kingdom of Netherlands, Italy, China, and other partners are here to deliberate on the priorities for accelerating SDG progress in Lagos.
Where will Lagos be in achieving the SDGs by 2030? That is, at the end of 2030, where will Lagos be? Are we going to be able to achieve all the SDGs?
Lagos State Office of the SDGs is taking a lead in championing SDG implementation in healthcare delivery, having slow-paced, decent work and economic growth, zero hunger, and the special advisor in charge of the office, Dr. Oluwafini, highlights other areas of focus for the government.
We have defined 9 high-impact initiatives to achieve our mandate, and we are prepared to take action. 4 key priority areas. We're hoping to unlock 240 million naira in grants over the next 3 years.
Development partnership with other countries must not be ignored in order to achieve valuable results of the SDG goals.
We all have to help each other. When I say all, it's all countries on the planet, because the Sustainable Development Goals were developed in the framework of the United Nations. So it's not the old-fashioned way of development cooperation, of me assisting you, but there's a common problem, there are common challenges, and we have noted 17 of them. And these challenges have to be addressed by all of us.
I hope that I can help the Lagos universities to find a Chinese partner, especially some vocational schools.
The Deputy Governor is of the opinion that sustainability of Lagos must be the first priority before working towards achieving the 17 goals of the SDG.
One of the biggest challenges in developing world to achieve all these 17 nice goals is fiscal planning. So when Lagos says, I'm removing these buildings, it's not about ethnicity. Don't get it wrong. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with how do we sustain that environment? How? If people can just build anyhow, we can build any place, then it's a recipe for disaster. We won't survive.
Collective efforts from the people and the government will go a long way in attaining the sustaining development goals in Lagos State.
And that's where we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.